The do-gooders believe that by passing a law saying that nobody shall get less than $2 an hour or $2.50 an hour or whatever the minimum wage is, you are helping poor people who need the money. You are doing nothing of the kind. What you are doing is to assure that people whose skills are not sufficient to justify that kind of a wage will be unemployed. It is no accident that the teenage unemployment rate, the unemployment rate among teenagers in this country, is over twice as high as the overall unemployment rate.
Now think about what he just said. You're killing jobs if you do this. You are not helping anybody out of poverty. You are outlawing people who don't have the skills to earn that high wage from getting jobs at entry-level positions. There is a reason we do internships in this country. It's because you need skills to do jobs. There is a reason I went to college. I got a degree specifically in broadcasting so I could have the skills to bring you a show like this and not be a complete tool who didn't know what I was doing. Granted, I may be doing it for free at the moment, but my professional job is also broadcasting. I pull home a salary because I learned skills in college for broadcasting. These are just the facts. You do not deserve a certain wage just because you exist. I'm sorry, but a trained monkey can push buttons. They've trained pigs to do math. I've seen the videos. You can YouTube that. It's a real thing. If pigs can do math, these minimum wage workers are screwed because you don't have to pay a pig. You just feed them. Imagine McDonald's. You get a pig that can count back your change. Oh, my God. But thankfully, it'll probably be replaced by machines anyway. Continuing right along.
It's no accident that that was not always the case. Until the 1950s, when the minimum wage rate was raised very drastically, very quickly, teenage unemployment was higher than ordinary unemployment because, of course, the teenagers are the ones who are just coming into the labor market. They're searching and finding jobs, and it's understandable that on the average they would have be unemployed more. But it was nothing like the extraordinary level it has now reached. It's close to 20%. Why? Because the minimum wage law is most properly described as a law saying employers must discriminate against people who have low skills. That's what the law says. The law says here's a man who has a skill which would justify a wage rate of $1.50, $2 an hour. You may not employ him. It's illegal because you have to. If you employ him, you have to pay him $2.50. Well, what's the result? To employ him at $2.50 is to engage in charity. Now, there's nothing wrong with charity, but most employers are not in a position where they can engage in that kind of charity. Thus, the consequences of minimum wage rates have been almost wholly bad, to increase unemployment and to increase poverty. Moreover, the effects have been concentrated on the groups that the do-gooders would most like to help. The people who have been hurt most by minimum wage laws are the blacks. I have often said that the most anti-Negro law on the books of this land is the minimum wage rate.
And you know who else says that? Thomas Sowell and me.
I think the real answer to your question is that you must not judge a bottle solely by its label. You have to look at what's inside and see what the law or the measure produces.
If one looked at the label, though, and perhaps one of those government regulations that you would look askance at is that we look at labels. If one looked at the label and identified the objective of minimum wages, are there no positive, legitimate objectives achieved by minimum wage?
None whatsoever. In my opinion, there is absolutely no positive objective achieved by minimum wages. Its real purpose is to reduce competition for the trade unions and make it easier for them to maintain the wages of their privileged members higher than the others.
Now think about that for a second. Minimum wage laws are not meant to help people. They are meant to hold wages extremely high to outlaw unskilled workers from being able to compete in the marketplace and to artificially inflate the wages of union workers, specialized workers, guilds, if you will. The reason minimum wage laws were instituted in the first place was racism. Now, he says the most racist law in the books is minimum wage laws. That's absolutely true. Southern workers, laborers, white workers were selling their skills at a certain price, and the newly freed slaves and Negroes that had learned a skill, black people that had learned a skill, would sell it for cheaper. And so they were beating out all the white people for these jobs. And so along comes white businessmen, and they're like, oh, well, we can't have this. We need to get all these people out of the marketplace. We can't have them beating us on these wages. Racism, racism, racism. And that's exactly what they did. They passed minimum wage laws so that the less skilled African American would not be able to sell it at a lower rate. He had to sell his skills for a higher rate, and people weren't going to hire an untested black person when they could hire the white guy who's been doing it for 20 years. And that's exactly what happened. And now you've got people flipping burgers that think, making $10 an hour more than a lot of college-educated people straight out of the gate, more than, soldiers, for that matter, make. And they think they deserve that wage. They think that because they exist, because they are working, that they should be able to afford all of these luxuries just because they hold down a job. They think, oh, I'm holding down a job. That's all I'm supposed to do. Why isn't the money coming? Huh? It's insane. It's not coming because your skills are not worth that much. I mean, that's the harsh reality, but folding T-shirts at Old Navy's not worth a lot of money. Flipping hamburgers and making sure that I get it with ketchup and mustard and no mayo is not a hard job. A 10-year-old could do that job and would probably do it happier and be able to spend the money on candy or whatever, or a new video game. Are you kidding me? If I could have flipped burgers at 12 years old to earn video game money, I would have worked more than any American. I would have worked so hard to pay for video games. I mean, I did odd jobs when I was a kid, but come on. The fact of the matter is, when you have extremely high minimum wages, let me tell you what happens. You're going to get replaced by machines. Period. There's a reason that people try to automate assembly lines. It's because it's a heck of a lot cheaper and more efficient and faster, which are redundant, but whatever, than paying a worker. And then people will be like, oh, well, then that means that somebody's losing their job. No, that means that more jobs have been created building these machines and maintaining them. But the point is, all these fast food workers going on strike because they want minimum wage, and Walmart workers and etc., their jobs will be removed. And more importantly, you decide what wage you work for. That's how the free market works. If a company decides they're going to offer 10 cents an hour, you're not going to take that job. So guess what? They don't have employees to fill their stores or their factories. So they have to raise wages to bring in more people. Are you going to break your back working 45, 50, 60 hours a week for $3 an hour? I don't think so. And nobody would. And for good reason. It's not a viable wage. You couldn't get anything done on that money. Now, people in, third world countries, India, Mexico, they work for that little because guess why? That money buys them a living. It buys them a lot. And more importantly, it's more than any of these other places are paying. But they also don't have the skills, the education to do anything else. People in China at these factories, people talk about child labor and stuff. These kids keep their families fed. To outlaw their working is to prevent their families from stopping starvation. And that's the hard truth of this argument. And in our country, when we're talking about how all the manufacturing jobs are leaving America and we don't export enough and we got to get more jobs, they want to pass minimum wage laws which are going to remove even more jobs. And then on top of that, you've got Obama talking about a trade agreement with all these Pacific countries that will basically, free everything up, which is great. Freeing everything up is fantastic. But all of these factories will move to whatever country pays the lower wages if it's a viable move, if they can afford to sell their factory and buy a new one. Yeah, they'll do it. That's a smart thing to do. I'm not going to pay somebody a whole bunch of money to clean my apartment when I can do it myself and save the money. I'm not going to pay somebody lots of money to make me a pizza when I could go buy one for $3 at the grocery store and heat it up in my oven. And that's the crux of this whole argument. You've got people that are saying, oh, for the workers, and they don't know what they're talking about. They don't understand that they are holding the ceiling down that these people are trying to break through. They don't understand that they are preventing people from gaining skills they need to get higher paying jobs. Yeah, you start flipping burgers or mopping the floors at McDonald's. A year, 2 years down the road, you could be managing a store if you're a good worker. The market rewards good workers by offering higher wages. Even if all you did was hold down that job, prove that you can show up on time and not be a screw-up, guess what? Somebody else will hire you for that skill alone. The fact that you held down a job, didn't get fired or written up for X amount of months, years. That's a fact. Going to take a quick break. We'll be back. Hey, look, we're back already. I said it was going to be a quick break, didn't I? Okay, now there's a lot of stuff going on in the news that has a more serious nature, and we're going to move right along to that. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is these riots that are going on in Europe and in South America. In Ukraine, let me just start from the beginning. In Ukraine, they needed a bailout. They were going to go bankrupt. There was a huge issue. They had problems, and in Ukraine, the president had two deals on the table. President and Parliament. They had a deal with the European Union, a bailout deal with them, which would have created closer economic ties with Western Europe. England, France, Spain, etc. And then there was a second plan from the Russians that created closer ties with Russia. Well, the Ukrainians were heavily in support of a deal with the European Union. I mean, they used to be dominated by Russia. I mean, Russia had them on a short leash. They were part of the Soviet Union, big time. And so when the president of Ukraine decided he was going to take the deal with Russia instead of what his people wanted, the deal with the European Union, massive riots broke out. And they've been going on since like November or December. It's been months of rioting. And there's been lots of clashes between rioters and police, and petrol bombs, Molotov cocktails, flaming balls of alcohol being thrown at police, and, police firing, pepper spray and water cannons and tear gas and all kinds of stuff at protesters, and, protesters and police throwing rocks back and forth, that kind of thing. And it's been a really gnarly situation. And, every time they have, a truce called, the Ukrainian government tries to give them an olive branch, but it's always a piece of junk. It's a bad deal. And so the Ukrainian people rightly get outraged, like, how dare you? Do you not understand? We are going to take our government back. Deal with it. And so then they're like, whoa, wait a second, don't beat me up. What if we did this? And it goes on like that. And they're like, okay, well, how about instead of this, we won't arrest you for protesting. And they're like, screw you. We're going to protest harder. Set stuff on fire. Rubble. Go. And so then they're like, oh, this is terrorism and nonsense, and you're evil and anti-government and anarchy. And in reality, they just want their government to represent them. It is no different than the American Revolution, except they're not killing people and declaring independence from their own government.